This is Ian Hartley.
I am Warren Kay.
And I am Sasha Steenbergen.
Welcome to the Rediscovering God Dialogue.
We invite you to join us as we endeavor to see Him more clearly
And love Him more dearly while following Him more nearly. Welcome to those of you that are on this journey to rediscover the God that Jesus knew. As I talk to people about the Bible, one of the questions that I get asked is, why did God allow the Bible to be written that way? And today we're going to look at a book in the Bible that it's very interesting. It dawned on me that God sent a correction, and we will talk about that the first two chapters perhaps corrected the view that people would assume from the book as it was originally written. So, Ian, why don't you take us into this discussion about the book of Job?
Okay, well, it's a pleasure to talk about the oldest book in the Old Testament, as near as we can tell. So I want us to read the first chapter just so we write into the spirit of what's going on, at least at the beginning of this dramatic story from antiquity. So let's start with Job, which is just before the book of Psalms, and read chapter 1 in its entirety.
There once was a man named Job who lived in the land of Uz. He was blameless, a man of complete integrity. He feared God and stayed away from evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 teams of oxen, and 500 female donkeys. He also had many servants. He was, in fact, the richest man in that entire area.
Job's sons would take turns preparing feasts in their homes, and they would invite their 3 sisters to celebrate with them. When these celebrations ended, sometimes after several days, Job would purify his children. He would get up early in the morning and offer a burnt offering for each of them. For Job said to himself, "Perhaps my children have sinned and have cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular practice.
One day, the members of the heavenly court came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser Satan came with them. "Where have you come from?" the Lord asked Satan.
Satan answered the Lord, "I've been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on."
Then the Lord asked Satan, "Have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil."
Satan replied to the Lord, "Yes, but Job has good reason to fear God. You have always put a wall of protection around him and his home and his property. You have made him prosper in everything he does. Look how rich he is. But reach out and take everything away that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face."
"All right, you may test him," the Lord said to Satan. "Do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but don't harm him physically." So Satan left the Lord's presence.
One day, when Job's sons and daughters were feasting at the oldest brother's house, a messenger arrived at Job's home with this news: "Your oxen were plowing, with the donkeys feeding beside them. When the Sabaeans raided us, they stole all the animals and killed all the farmhands. I am the only one who escaped to tell you."
While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news: "The fire of God has fallen from heaven and burned up your sheep and all the shepherds. I am the only one who has escaped to tell you."
While he was still speaking, a third messenger arrived with this news: "3 bands of Chaldean raiders have stolen your camels and killed your servants. I am the only one who escaped to tell you."
While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news: Your sons and daughters were feasting in their oldest brother's home. Suddenly, a powerful wind swept in from the wilderness and hit the house on all sides. The house collapsed, and all your children are dead. I am the only one who has escaped to tell you.
Job stood up and tore his robe in grief. Then he shaved his head and fell to the ground to worship. He said, I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord.
In all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God.
So it's pretty dramatic, isn't it?
Mm.
I want you to notice something. How many people escape in each tragedy to tell the story?
Only one.
How many tragedies are there?
4.
Okay, so do you smell a rat? There are 4 tragedies, and in each case, only one person survives to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
This is a structure that's telling you something about the nature of the story. It's a novel, if you like. It's an attempt to explain theodicy or suffering allowed or promoted by God in the world. So we can't miss these clues that are given to us. You know, if I say to you there was a Scotchman, an Englishman, and a Frenchman, what do you know is going to come next?
Yeah, a punchline.
Yeah, I'm telling you a joke by that very structure right at the beginning. If I say to you, once upon a time in a faraway place, long, long ago, you know what's coming. Yeah, there's a fairy story coming, and it's going to end, and they lived happily ever afterwards. So all stories have structures that give you a clue as to what genre they belong to. So just the fact that you have 4 tragedies and only one witness escapes every time tells you about the structure of the story.
Yeah, right.
So we think, we're going to come to it in a minute, but we think that from chapters 3 to pretty much the end of the book is a very ancient story explaining where suffering comes from. And if you only read chapters 3 to 42, you get the idea, because Job keeps blaming God for the tragedy that's come on him. The tragedy comes from God. And then if you look at chapters 1 and 2, there's another explanation, that there's this being, the Shaitan, as is referred to in the Hebrew Bible, that is causing the trouble, and it's not God. So that's a whole new insight. Now, I want you to notice, if you just look at your Bible, at the structure, you can see that the first 2 chapters have a different literary structure to chapters 3 onwards. Have either of you noticed that?
Yes. Yeah, it's very evident that the first 2 chapters are prose, and then the rest of the book is poetry, except for the conclusion at the very end.
Yes. So this is important to notice, because it indicates that the first 2 chapters were added to the rest of the book. And because in the first 2 chapters we have this being, Satan, or the Shaitan in Hebrew, is referred to, that only occurs after the Babylonian captivity. So this is giving you a clue that from chapters 3 onwards was written a long time before the Babylonian captivity. And we think a long time before Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. And then these 2 explaining chapters were added after the concept of a Satan entered into Jewish understanding. We think they got it from the captivity in Mesopotamia or Babylon.
So, Ian, I just noticed something that I hadn't seen before. The last verse, verse 22, that Sasha read. In all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. And he did blame God. He said, God has sent all these things to me, but he wasn't sinning in blaming God because he was not informed. They all assumed that God was the one that sent this. And it wasn't until later that they realized the first 2 chapters, which Job never was aware of.
Yeah. That's as good an explanation as I've heard. That Job did not sin in this because the writer of the first 2 chapters recognizes that Job was ignorant of the existence of the Shaitan, or the Satan. This is the interesting thing about God. God's very secure. You can hurl accusations at him. You know, this reminds me of these ankle-biter dogs. The only dogs that have ever actually bitten me. They rush around your ankles making loud noises and trying to nip your ankles, but you don't really feel threatened. And if they get too aggressive, you might give one a gentle kick. I say gentle to keep you happy, Sasha. But you don't actually feel threatened by an ankle biter.
Yeah.
And God doesn't feel threatened by our accusations or complaints about him. Right, so let's actually look at the book now. The right place to start is at the beginning. If you want to know who done it in Job, better read the last chapter first. But if you have patience, the Bible being, among other things, great literature, is full of surprises. One of these surprises is that in the first written of the 66 books, the villain is unmasked for the discerning reader. Once this is noticed by the reader, the understanding of the rest of the Bible is dramatically and radically different.
I think that's really significant, that if only we had realized right at the very beginning of the Old Testament this, it would have changed how we related to the whole rest of the Old Testament.
Yeah, it's like God has slipped in a corrective.
Yeah.
About 500 years before Jesus, when they returned from the captivity. Certainly the book of Job is about 3 misguided comforters: the ignorance of Job, his sour wife, the creative power of God. It is a tragic story of misfortune, but followed by redemption and restoration. But the most important part of the book lies elsewhere. Here it comes then. Right in chapter 1, Satan says the following to God. Job 1, verse 11.
But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face.
Okay, notice now what Satan is saying. If God strikes Job, then Job's attitude will change. And this is the master ploy of an evil being called the devil or Satan, as will emerge in the rest of the Bible, that he blames God for the work he does. Stretch out your hand and touch him, and he will curse you to your face. God never stretches out his hand and touches Job or his possessions. It is the Satan who does that. So right here, you've got an explanation of the process that this evil being follows. He gets God blamed for his own wicked work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it is the work of an evil genius.
Mm-hmm.
So we read now verse 12.
The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger."
Okay, so look at the response from the Lord. Everything he has is in your hands. So who is the operative evil agent here? Well, verse 12 tells you.
Mm-hmm.
Job is now in the hands of the Satan.
Yeah.
So God is going to strike Job, and this means Job is in Satan's hands. Are God and Satan in cahoots in the misfortunes that fall on Job? Do they both actively plan and execute the tragedies that strike him? When verse 16, and I want us to read that verse 16.
The fire, while he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news: the fire of God has fallen from heaven and burned up your sheep and all the shepherds. I am the only one who escaped to tell you.
Okay, so now we have the fire of God falling on the sheep and the herders, but we know where this fire is coming from. We know that it is via the agency of the Satan, and yet it is labeled fire of God.
Yeah.
See, now this is where reading carefully is so important, because when you come to the last book of the Bible, it says the fire from heaven, or the fire of God came down and destroyed the wicked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And here you have a parallel situation of this similar phrasing, is that the attribution of the causation is laid on God by the wording.
Mm-hmm.
So we've mentioned this before, but even wording in insurance language today refers to acts of God,
Mm-hmm.
such as earthquakes, floods, tornadoes, which is patently untrue. So when it says that the fire of God destroyed the sheep and the herds, it's not a literal statement. It's an idiomatic statement. What it's saying is fire came down out of the sky, probably lightning, and struck the sheep and the herders.
Mm-hmm.
And usually we make the distinction between literal and idiomatic statements. But sometimes it slips by, and we read an idiom as a literal statement.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're a discerning reader, you can see that what this chapter is saying, and the next chapter, is that God is the protector and Satan is the destroyer. Now, at this point in time, we do not address the morality of God allowing an evil being to afflict his children. That's a story for another day. Yeah. But what we have here in actuality and reality is that God has been protecting Job. The Satan acknowledges this, and he gets permission to afflict Job with tragedy and have it blamed on God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I always had a hard time with the fact that, God was like, let me just point out this guy over here. He's pretty awesome. He's great. And just exhibit A over here. And if Job had known anything, he'd been like, shh, quiet down now. Let's not draw attention to me here. But I was just thinking about how at the beginning of that discussion, he says to Satan, where have you been? And Satan's like, I've been patrolling the whole earth and watching everything that's been going on. So I think that helps me a little bit because I know that, Satan's very well aware of everything that's going on. And so I can imagine in a storytelling sense, it works very well for the story to go this way, that God is the one pointing out Job, his very blameless servant, in this story. Because I kind of always had a feeling of like, if God hadn't have pointed Job out, then, maybe Satan wouldn't have had to go and try to bring all this havoc into his life, because I did ascribe some blame to God for basically calling him out and allowing this all to happen in this way. But if I see it more as a story to illustrate where the causation is and who the destroyer is, that helps me a lot.
Good. So think of Job as an archetypical
Yes.
human being. He represents humanity.
Yeah.
Now, I want to draw something else out from your comments, is that God is actually bragging about Job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no reason not to believe that God does the same today.
Mm-hmm.
And that he will say to Gabriel, hey, Gaby, babe, have you noticed Sasha today? And, this is describing God as somebody who's proud of his children.
Yeah.
So don't miss that part, Sasha.
Yeah, totally. Love it.
Okay, the role of protector and destroyer are confirmed in chapter 2 so clearly that only those who choose to be blind cannot see it. That's pretty harsh of me. So I want us to read chapter 2, verse 3.
Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man that fears God and shuns evil. And he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him without any reason. Skin for skin, Satan replied. A man will give all he has for his own life, but stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life.
Okay, so, chapters 1 and 2, you could have copied chapter 1 and then just make a few adjustments for chapter 2 because they're so similar. Okay, so in chapter 1, you can touch his possessions. Chapter 2, you can touch the man, but you can't take his life. Okay. There it is again. You, that is Satan, must spare his life. If that is not enough to identify the villain, read the next verse, Job 2, verse 6.
Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head.
One cannot miss it. Satan is the destroyer and God is the protector. All at once, we have identified the source of trauma and tragedy, of doubt and discouragement, of pain and persecution. But we have also discovered much more. We have identified the Hebrew mindset that permeates all of the Bible. In the writer's mind, the all-powerful God is the source of all these misfortunes because he allows them at the horrible hand of the deceiving serpent, Satan, who deceives the whole world. So Satan certainly deceived Job. While we can read the first 2 chapters and understand what's going on behind the scenes, Job was ignorant of this backstory. Throughout the narrative, he demonstrates his belief that all his misfortune comes from God. Here are some examples. Job 2, verse 10.
He replied, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? In all this, Job did not sin in what he said.
Okay, so very clearly talking to his wife, he's of the opinion that good and bad come from God.
Mm-hmm.
In if you accept the good, why not? Then you are duty bound to accept. So in the traditional King James Version, it says that the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. If you go to many funerals, you will quickly hear that phrase being repeated ad infinitum. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. And when I talk to seniors, people who've lived a long life, most of them want to die. And they say to me, pray to the Lord that he will come and take me away. And then I'm in a quandary. Shall I say, dear Lord, please come and take Grandma Mary away? Well, I cannot tell a lie. You know, death is the prerogative of the devil. It is alien to God. He is the giver of life and abundant life. He is the resurrection and the life. There is no death in God in any way. It is an alien intruder into the beautiful universe that he created. How about Job 6, verse 4?
The arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks in their poison. God's terrors are marshaled against me.
Okay, this is, and the other references here. Pick one, Warren, and we'll read it.
Okay, I'm going to pick 16 and verses 7 to 9. O God, you have ground me down and devastated my family. As if I prove I have sinned, you've reduced me to skin and bones. My gaunt flesh testifies against me. God hates me and angrily tears me apart. He snaps his teeth at me. He pierces me with his eyes. People jeer and laugh at me. They slap my cheek in contempt. A mob gathers against me.
So all of this is caused by God, according to Job.
Yeah.
And in his sequence of prayers throughout the book of Job, every prayer that he prays is this lament against God. Why is God doing this to me? So as we've mentioned, Job knew nothing about chapters 1 and 2. His story starts in 3 and goes on pretty much to the end of the book. So in the document, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 places where Job blames God for the misfortune that's come upon him. And this is the tragedy of our misinformation about God that permeates the whole of the Old Testament and even some of the New Testament. So this is a master stroke of an evil genius, is he can get this false concept implanted in the ideas of the stories in the Old Testament and in the thinking of the writers. So it's important at this point to say, so why did God allow this to happen? Why don't we have a perfect record of what actually happened behind the scenes in the Old Testament?
And, that's a question that often I get asked as I talk with people, and they say, why did God allow the Bible to be written the way it is if it's not clearly reflecting who he is? And I think this is an example of where God does send a correction in having the first 2 chapters added, as we pointed out. But I think part of it is reflected in Hebrews chapter 1, where it says God sent all these prophets, but in the end, he had to send his son. God works with people where they're at, and they are simply responding from their perspective of God in their environment. And only Jesus had the true picture of God. He's the only one that knows God's heart.
Yeah, I like that. He's the only one who knows God's heart. You're quoting John 1:18.
Yeah.
That is a very powerful statement, because you can know a person legally and factually and not know their heart. They may have never revealed their heart to you. Some people find that very difficult to do. Other people have been wounded by doing so, and so they cover to protect themselves. And so we're not used to people revealing their hearts. And nobody seems to know God's heart like Jesus does, which means that God's heart has also been obscured to some extent.
Yeah.
Also, I was just thinking about the Old Testament. I feel like there were so many times where, God said, I will go before you and I will make a way in this land. But the people chose to go and kill all the people instead of trusting and waiting. And so it's almost like God oftentimes never gets a chance to show his heart because the people are rushing in thinking this must be the way it's done. And that's obviously so counter to God's heart. So
And we need to be realistic about this. When you reveal God's heart in words, or more importantly in deeds, there's a hatred against you from the evil one and those who work with him. One should not be surprised that when you reveal the true heart of God, that you run into opposition. In fact, that's probably the greatest evidence that what you are sharing is of great importance. So get it in your head, cherish it, and the God who loved us unto death emerges from the pages that have been smudged and dusted with misapprehension about the character and government of the Creator, Maintainer, Redeemer God. Will you be led astray by the deceiver as you read the scriptures? It has happened before, according to Jesus. John 5:39-40.
you diligently study the scriptures that testify about me, yet you refuse to come to me to have life.
So Jesus is saying this to experts in the Old Testament. These are the theologians of the day. Many of them have committed the Old Testament to memory. And they don't get it.
Yeah.
The one to which the Old Testament pointed has arrived, and they don't recognize him.
There's a beautiful reference right at the end of the book of Luke, where Jesus has been resurrected and he's meeting with the disciples. And here it is, Luke 24, verse 45. Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures. They were finally in a position where they could understand what he was talking about, that he tried to communicate to them. And now he'd done lots of miracles, but this was an amazing one where he opened their minds to understand. And then they were just thrilled. They were ready to be empowered to take this message to the world because they finally understood what he had accomplished.
That's amazing.
Thank you. So it requires a great deal of effort to change the way we have thought for years or decades. But it's worth the effort, since truth is the pearl of great price. And we're not talking about the truth that Google brings you. We're talking about the truth about God. When Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, he's not claiming to be Google. He's claiming that he knows God better than anyone else in the universe. Okay. So there's much more from this story. In this dialogue between God and Satan, who have illustrated the conflict between good and evil, between right and wrong, between love and selfishness, between light and darkness. God was challenged from all sides by Satan. He accuses Job of serving God for the protection he gets out of it. Like, this is a real story out of The Godfather. You know, the mafiosi are protecting this business because they're being paid for protection. And it's devilish, the accusation that's actually being made here. For what reason or reasons does God serve God? Does Job serve God? There's only one way to answer that accusation. God is forced to allow trouble to come to Job. It is a risk he must take, and this is the cost of freedom. There's only one way to answer that question. I mean, you can have a philosophical discussion and make claims, but in reality, you must let the process run and see what emerges at the end of the day. In taking this risk on Job, God opens himself to possible blame for being responsible for all that evil or misfortune that comes upon Job. The great news from the story of Job is, however, that he comes through with flying colors on the central issue. While Job has many misunderstandings about God, his loyalty is unsullied. He does not turn on God because of his misfortune. He is not God's friend for what he can get out of him. Here is a man who operates on the principles of heaven. But then God has and continues to be accused of evil in the creation of every being who started out good and turned bad. Since God knew the future, he is responsible for all evil beings, though they started out good. He knew it would end up being bad. Therefore, he's party to the cause of evil. Some would argue that God went ahead and created evil because his rightness would be even more visible and prominent as a result of the contrast between good and evil. This is where the cross of Calvary finds its centrality in Christian thinking. At the cross, God in Christ was faced with a supreme test of his being. Is there any selfishness of God? To Christ it appeared that he was dying forever at the hands of his creation. Shall he die forever, or shall he go back to life in heaven? When Christ cries out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" he expresses a blackness of depression that prevented his seeing through the gates of the grave. At that moment, Jesus believed he was dying forever. That is part of the triumph of the cross. Jesus, who is God, would rather die than have his creation lose hope in life. That is the magnificent answer of love to the selfishness of God. Perhaps it would have been better to place the book of Job right at the beginning of the Old Testament. In that way, many of the misconceptions created by the first 5 books could have been prevented. But then again, possibly not. Most readers seem to have missed the implication of what the book teaches in essence. The right perspective is not easy to gain and maintain because the evil one has sown weeds in the wheat. It takes a lot of mental weeding to keep the wheat clean in our minds, but it can be done. It must be done by God's friends. So do it.
Mm-hmm. And that's really what this journey is all about, to rediscover the God that Jesus knew and bring clarity, because so much of Scripture has been misunderstood and taken literally rather than interpreted through the eyes of Jesus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know, just a simple reference that we've made before is that when Copernicus and Galileo say that the earth goes round the sun, and the sun does not go round the earth. Thou speaking the truth that has been obscured for thousands of years. But it takes us 200 to 300 years before this becomes common knowledge.
Yeah.
It seems like misunderstanding is more readily accepted than the truth of nature and certainly the truth about God.
Yeah.
And it takes time and energy and effort to discover truth and to propagate truth.
Well, and great.
Somehow the falsehood seems to be the default setting that we grow up with.
Well, this is your last chance to say something.
Thank you. This has been good.
Thank you.
Dear God, we're happy to be in your presence, and we thank you for your patience down through the millennia with us. All our misunderstandings and the pain and the blame and the accusations that we have put on you. And it seems we have great difficulty in taking responsibility for ourselves. And the story in Genesis 3 illustrates that, but we still fight it and look for ways to blame others or even you. And we acknowledge our sin before you. And thank you for your forgiveness and understanding and patience. You truly are a God of essential and central love in the heart of your being. How we covet your heart. And thank you for your promise of new hearts for old. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Find the recording of our podcast on our website, as well as the PDF document that we've been using, so you can follow along or at least see all the passages. And so that website is rediscoveringgod.ca, and on there is the PDF document, the link for the podcast, as well as our YouTube link. We are now on YouTube. So if you want to see us live, then you can go and watch it on YouTube.
Wonderful. And we'd also love to invite you to our Monday evening Zoom discussion where Ian and Warren lead us out. And we are currently going through the podcast where we get to have discussion and really dive in a little deeper and get our most pressing questions answered. It's a really wonderful time of fellowship and connection with the group. We share in community and resources as well. We'd really love to have you join us. We're going to be meeting at 6:30 Mountain Standard Time. You just add in the link 403-506-9201. We'd love to see you.
And if you'd like to connect with us, you can reach us at rediscoveringgod2020@gmail.com. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you and know how this journey of rediscovering the God that Jesus knew is changing your life. Take care.